And welcome everyone to a special Monday afternoon Mitchell Talks on energy. You're so glad that you're with us. I'm going to jump right into this because this is an exciting topic. And I've never done three states officials at one time on an issue that is this important. So let me jump right into it. Thanks everyone joining us on Mitchell Talks News 9 News on 6. Let's start with our guest, and this is going to be great. And we'll start with the Secretary of Energy and Environment in Oklahoma, the Honorable Ken Wagner. Mr. Secretary, good to have you.
Well, it's good to see you again, and this time I brought a couple of my good friends. So I'm excited for your audience to meet them and hear their passion for some of the things we're passionate about in Oklahoma.
And let's not waste any time. Let's bring them in. Let's start with our friends to our west, the Arkansas Secretary of Energy, Becky Keough. Madam Secretary, good to see you this afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. It's always good to be with friends, and I consider Secretary Wagner, a great friend, but also a great partner in a lot of things that we worked on together. So good to talk to you today on an important subject like this.
It's going to be great. And also another guest of Secretary Wagner's, the Director of Energy. And Jason, I got to tell you, you have a long title down there in Baton Rouge. But good to have you. It's basically you're the Secretary of Energy in Louisiana, if Low Country Board to describe it, but it's a little different title there in Baton Rouge. Welcome, sir.
Scott, thanks so much for having us. I work for Secretary Tom Harris, and he's the Cabinet Secretary, and I run the State Energy Office, which is in his group. So it's a pleasure to be with Secretary Keough and Secretary Wagner. We've got a tremendous opportunity and some exciting stuff happening with our states, and can't wait to catch up about it today.
That's great. Let's just start with the headline. The headline was that Governor Edwards, Governor Stitt, and Governor Hutchinson last week announced a bipartisan three-state initiative dealing with hydrogen. Okay, so now we're getting into the really deep water there in terms of making this exciting. The fact is, this is amazingly exciting, what's going on with this. Secretary Wagner, could you just explain to our viewers what this is? And we'll go around the room, but what this is and why it's so important for our region.
Well, so the convening part of this is the bipartisan infrastructure law. But I will tell you, we see this as much broader than just that. That's really just a rallying point that got us to talk about things that were happening in our three states anyway. And really, this is a three-state partnership that we believe was intentionally designed that you can demonstrate the entire value chain of hydrogen within our three states. And we'll get into the reason that's important, but just, and every one of us has different things that we'd like to highlight about this partnership. But when you think about it, what other part of the country do you have a seaport that goes across Oklahoma all the way through the state of Arkansas down to the Louisiana Gulf Coast? You think about the intermodal rail and the people that use it. You think about the trucking companies in Oklahoma, and you think about the large partners in Arkansas who have really made that their they designed the intermodal rail, right? And so, then we're connected by pipelines between the three states all the way to the Gulf Coast. And we also have some of the most valuable freight traveled interstate highways that connect us in the world, if not just the country. So I think when you think about those possibilities, and Jason certainly will talk about their industrial corridor, which, you think about their emissions profile is different than it is in Oklahoma and Arkansas, which brings this diverse mix of all the things that, number one, that we can do, and number two, that we need to do for our energy mix, for our citizens, for our emissions, all of the above. And so that's what I would say. And then, to top it off, we're friends, right? And this relationship, this three-state partnership, was born of friendship and complementary assets. So with that, I'd pass it to whomever you want to go to next, Scott.
Secretary Keough?
Well, yeah, and not only are we close friends, but our governors are very close friends, and that makes a huge difference when you talk about setting policy. But I know Governor Hutchinson is currently serving as chair of the NGA, has stood before me in front of infrastructure discussions and other cabinet members and talked about the importance and the value of getting a regional effort underway, that will be a key success in the investment in our states going forward. I think he was quite pleased to announce this as one of his first initiatives on a regional level that he sees investing in the future in Arkansas. But as Ken has said, so carefully, so well, we in Arkansas, of course, we pride ourselves in being a natural state. We pride ourselves in our abundant resources that we have, and but we also ourselves in clean, but also reliable and cheap energy sources for our consumers here in Arkansas. We also see some very prominent partnerships that we think can align in this in Arkansas through some of our corporate partners. We have some of the corporate partners that are very outspoken about energy efficiency and sustainability as well. And now with the investment of the steel manufacturing business in Arkansas becoming number one in the country, we stand carefully positioned, but excitingly positioned to be able to see that industry reform itself. And they've announced, I know you in their announcement just a month or so ago, announced the idea of, having set goals about being a green steel mill and LEED certified, doing some fairly significant transformational approaches to production of steel in this country. So I think we're just real excited about the idea that we can bring energy technology forward. I think these states have all worked on a technology front more than a regulatory front in terms of advancing good ideas, but also at the end of the day, that's how we keep lasting for our states because of the affordability, the safety, the productivity that we can, see out of this kind of effort is just, I think we stand better positioned than many states in the U.S. to lead this demonstration. So I'm hopeful that we do have our competitive application in, and that's recognized at the federal level.
Jason, your thoughts about this deal?
Sure. So, Scott, thanks so much. And I think that you can hear from Secretary Keough and Secretary Wagner that there's a tremendous spirit of collaboration. I've had the opportunity through the course of probably several meetings to hear our governor speak about, their energy policies and things that they're trying to move forward. We have recently finished the first iteration of our climate task force, which brought together NGOs, industry, and a lot of different partners, and had a lot of very insightful conversations about where we wanted to take energy moving forward in terms of how we're going to look at long-term decarbonization in Louisiana. One of the overwhelming themes when we look at this is that our industrial partners in this have to have a seat at the table to work towards solutions. And I think that when you look at just the emissions in Louisiana, it's a bit unique. We are very similar in terms of we have a lot of our emissions come mostly from our industrial sources. So concentrating and looking for solutions for that corridor and for that industry is very important. So I think that as we've gone through this process, we've identified some key pillars that we're trying to focus on and make sure that we have the regulatory policies and procedures in place, and also have people at the table who are working through solutions. And one of the most exciting things that continue to come up over and over again, just through a lot of different conversations and through traveling and from working with a lot of different partners, was just trying to facilitate long-term production of hydrogen. Because we've seen, when you do your homework and you start looking at applications and uses, it's very obvious that I think that, right now we have hydrogen production that's occurring all across the country, but the expansion and the use of hydrogen into a lot of these facilities, into a lot of these different industries, can actually help them with long-term decarbonization, which helps everybody. We obviously have a lot of the products that are shipped all over the world that happen in a lot of these corridors in our states. So we want to look at this as a long-term goal for trying to work towards decarbonization. And I think that hydrogen is a key part in how we're going to get there. So we've had a lot of stuff happening in our state that supports that. We've had some recent project announcements of folks who are advancing production of hydrogen. But at the end of the day, we're looking at all the different parts and pieces on how we can cultivate demand. In other words, how we can get more mobility folks, more ports in our transportation infrastructure to be more integrated and to get hydrogen into this infrastructure, and really looking at how we bring in and further facilitate production of clean and low carbon hydrogen. So I think that the excitement level that we've seen from our industrial partners and from folks who are looking at this is very, very high. And I think that when we approach this, one of the things that makes this collaboration so strong is that these states have very complementary interests. We think that, our energy focus is there, but we also have a very strong focus on the environment and our communities. And we want to do things in a very clear and responsible manner when we're doing and working on energy. And I think that our 3 states have demonstrated that we've done this, and that this is a fantastic opportunity with our partners of the Department of Energy to advance long-term production of hydrogen. And I want to give kudos to them for their very forward thinking. I think that for us, we always wanted to think big when we started to put this together. I think that what you will find is that across the country, there have been small announcements of projects and small announcements of infrastructure. But when we approached this, we wanted to put something together that had substance. And I think that right now, having a 3-state partnership can really serve as a catalyst for a future or incubator or something that's going to really facilitate long-term investment in this region, to let folks know that we're serious about clean energy and trying to make sure that our states are working together. And we want to let folks know that we want them to live and to work here, and to make sure that hydrogen remains a high priority for us in all of our states.
Secretary Wagner has had a hydrogen task force. We can spend a long time about that one, but I've just finished, which will be debuting on Newsline News on 6 very soon, a series with former Secretary Michael Ming. I'm sure Secretary Wagner, you know him very well, but done some projects on here. But when we start talking about hydrogen and the colors, it's almost like George Jetson time. And especially the media, they like to cover the irritation between legacy companies and renewables. I mean, all of it's the sort of things that's not cooperative and not really focusing on what's happening with hydrogen. And so I think it's maybe the most unreported energy source in this country. I know it certainly is here. And I'm wondering, could we take just a moment for folks that could be watching this and going, what the heck is hydrogen? Isn't that something they make bombs out of? To just give us some idea about how advanced this is and how real it is, that this is not some sort of Star Wars energy. This is really happening right now. Secretary Wagner, Secretary Keough, and Director Lanclos, if y'all could just take a minute, I'm going to jump out of here to explain for folks just how real this is.
Well, so all of these things are well-known technologies. Hydrogen has been around for, centuries really, but it's the element number 1, right? So it's the most common element on Earth, and it just happens that it's usually attached to something else, like water, like methane, or like carbon in the sense of methane. And so, it's technology. It is a fuel source. We've been using it in the space missions for, really literally the better part of a century. And so today we're now moving those technologies towards real commercialization. And the benefit of hydrogen is that it's a carbon-free energy source if it's made where you keep the carbon intensity down. And that's the colors. And I think Jason probably will address the colors and how that's going. But, so when you have a combustion of, hydrogen, or you use it in a fuel cell where it creates heat that creates electricity or power, the emissions that come from that is water. So it actually will emit water into the full life cycle of sustainability. And so you can see why there's a push towards getting greater fuel, cleaner energy sources. And so, that's why the push today with looking at carbon intensity around traditional fuels. I will say that with what's happening in Russia and the Ukraine, it does both help drive the conversation around hydrogen, but it also helps drive what we in these 3 states push, which is we need energy security. We need energy affordability. And it's no surprise that if you look at the most affordable states for energy in the country, our 3 states are always in the top 5 and usually in the top 3. And so we're thrilled about, how we can show that you can do clean energy, whether that source is solar in Arkansas, whether it's wind or natural gas in Oklahoma, or whether it's one combination of offshore wind and natural gas in Louisiana. Whatever that source of energy that you can make hydrogen from needs to be a part of the mix. And so the technologies, you can run cars, you can run industrial plants, you can use it in power plants, you can run long haul over the road trucks with it. And I think those are kind of your primary applications. But I like to use this application because it's happening today. There's a company at the Port of Tulsa, or what we used to know as the Port of Keough, that's actually, their business is in part retrofitting drones with hydrogen fuel cells and removing the batteries. And they're doing that today. They can refuel them with micro refueling stations. And the flight time is greatly enhanced because the weight is so much lighter. And there are similar attributes for transportation, whether it's shipping, whether it's forklifts, whether it's over the road trucking. And in that case, certainly is a great case to be made. And so, I'll pass it to one of the others, but there's plenty of end uses that are on the cusp of commercialization. And that's what the hydrogen shot or the hydrogen hub is really designed to do. It's not long-term research. This is not, NASA type research. They've got ARPA-E, for those university-based long-term research projects. This is about demonstrating as many end uses to show that hydrogen is a commercially viable energy source that can be put in the tools that you have in your energy mix as a state and as a country.
Yeah, I'll add, I know, Ken, I think you were quoted last day or two that it's not a magic molecule, but in many ways it offers a lot of answers. And I think it brings us to the table with those that know this chemical the best, but also have a healthy history in producing hydrogen in a safe manner and uses of hydrogen. And those are going to be all critical in these demonstrations as they go forward. And I know a lot of the demonstration is about driving costs down so that we can put this to scale, if you will, or out in the consumer network. And I think mentioning again, these three states are well positioned with the consumer mix we have, or the businesses, corporations that we have, and the consumer demands that we think we can make that marriage happen in a more effective way. So I appreciate Ken's point on a lot of this, that we need to consider all energy sources going forward as we look at what the value of, we look at the value of each of these types of sources and what do they bring to the table, because that is what leads ultimately to U.S. being secure in our energy future. And we know that is being challenged as we go through this really difficult time right now. And we want to make sure that we continue to be that leader on a global level as well, that we can protect our own territories, if you will, and our states and our tribes, those folks that live and work and play daily in our states. But we also want to make sure that we're not going to be at risk of a lot of changing pricing that we're seeing literally at the pump today. So those are the kind of things we're looking at. We're also excited about other energy sources and electrification and things like that coming across our states. I know our utility companies have been reaching out. They're very interested in the alignment of the three states about this and what it might mean as they look at hydrogen future just in the generation of electricity. So I'm looking forward to those conversations. I think this is the start of a lot of dialogue, but hopefully more than dialogue, but real meaningful forward movement in getting hydrogen in the marketplace. So Jason, you may want to add to that since you have a big marketplace down there in Louisiana.
Sure. Thanks, Secretary Keough and Secretary Wagner. And I think that y'all hit on some very key points. And I think that at the end of the day, you've heard that hydrogen is used in a lot of different industrial processes. It has a tremendous amount of uses in energy. There are fuel cells on the transportation side, that there are companies in Oklahoma that are already working on really trying to build that out as an industry. And we've talked to lots of different companies and a lot of different people who are what I would consider at the tip in terms of technologies and moving hydrogen forward. And fuel cells are super exciting. We've heard from companies who are retrofitting forklifts in the industrial processes where they take the existing propane tanks or others off and put in a fuel cell. They've gotten tremendous amount of value from the data that they've collected from that shows that it's efficient, that they've been done, has no emission profile whatsoever. So it can work in a lot of these spaces and warehouses that you have a lot of heat and it gets very hot. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to work with the folks who are really working on technological advances and understand better how we can start focusing on lower carbon intensity hydrogen. And the original crux of your question, Scott, was on the colors. There are a lot of colors. I think at the end of the day, the most common are the 5 colors, which is gray, pink, brown, green, and blue. We could spend a lot of time talking through each one of those, but I think that what we're trying to do with this partnership is to focus on low carbon intensity hydrogen. And I think that right now we've had a recent project announcement, which is a blue hydrogen facility, which is really an advanced form of producing hydrogen that actually has a lower carbon footprint, and the carbon is captured and injected or sequestered underneath Earth's surface, probably 5,000 to 7,000 feet. So gray is produced predominantly with natural gas, brown is from coal, green is obviously with a full renewable component, and then blue has the carbon CCUS that's associated with it. So we're focused a lot on carbon intensity and trying to really start to look at how we get those overall costs of manufacturing down. And I think that one of the things that I thought was so telling and so informative about some of the work that Oklahoma's task force did was that it really brought a lot of the industrial partners to the table, which highlights that there is a tremendous emphasis on getting the cost of production of hydrogen down. And Secretary Wagner mentioned Earthshot, which is the overall goal is to try to get the cost of hydrogen from $5 per kilogram down to $1 per kilogram, which is a heavy lift. And right now, without getting too technical, the equipment that is used to produce green hydrogen it's something called an electrolyzer, which those are expensive, and there are also a lot of those parts and pieces in electrolyzers are made by hand. And so you can imagine in terms of production, in terms of cost, it is expensive. So in other words, to make a full green hydrogen, you have to have a renewable component, and you have to have these electrolyzers. The intent of trying to bring a lot of these technologies to the table is to develop economies of scale and to try to learn from these processes and to try to get the overall cost of production down to where demand develops and we actually start to see folks using it in everyday applications in many different forms. And at the end of the day, really start to get the economics to make sense so we can get towards those lower carbon fuels and lower carbon hydrogen.
So I've learned when we start talking about the colors, the series I've done with Secretary Ming, that is interesting. The politics all behind that. We're not getting in that today, but let me talk to you about the infrastructure that I'm curious about. So this win. So if you win this deal and you get this facility, so I guess Department of Energy, they're the ones that are going to be deciding go or not go. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I want to point out, this infrastructure bill is really interesting, right? Because the Department of Energy in October of 2021 had the number of employees it had. And then in November, it had the same number of employees, but it just had $62 billion that it now is tasked with implementing with the same number of employees who didn't write the bill. And so what we've learned is that the Department of Energy is truly relying on states, local governments, industry, energy producers, stakeholders, environmental groups to learn how they should implement these programs, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's direct air capture, whether it's carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, whether it's well plugging, whatever that is. And I will commend them that they really have reached out. We've had tremendous opportunities. This group in particular has had tremendous opportunities to really talk with the people in those offices where those decisions will ultimately be made, and even at the highest political levels. And so we've been, regardless of color of state, to keep with political colors, we found them that they're very open to talking to us, and our group has been well received. Obviously they don't tell you that you're going to be successful or not, but certainly they were not discouraging of our inclination to go big. And so we see this as these three states actually administering the award if we're ultimately successful. But that doesn't mean that if we want to do a demonstration through a pipe that goes from Texas through Oklahoma to Kansas, those molecules won't stop at the state line or at the state border. And if we can use pore space or sequestration facilities in Kansas that makes sense for the demonstration of something, then we're going to try and go and expand that partnership to do the demonstration with those states, with those local governments, with those tribal governments, whomever. It's more about the administration of it than it is the geographic borders, right? And we see the award as only a small piece. It is a rallying point, and certainly is helpful for catalyzing the three of us and our governors and there's a great, and Jason can talk about the university partnership as well, that we have a great university partnership coming behind us to support this partnership that should be announced any day. And we're excited. It has the three biggest universities in Oklahoma and the biggest universities in all of our states. So we see this as just the small part. When you think about the size of the Louisiana investment, that's $4.5 billion around that blue hydrogen facility, that clean hydrogen facility. In Oklahoma, we're talking about $700 million that's already been announced, and others hopefully in the near future. And I can't imagine the size of the steel plant in Arkansas. So you can see that somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 billion really is only a part of the piece of the puzzle to make this a day-to-day thought. And the other thing I'd point out before I just turn it over is the idea of a hub, right? We hear companies use the idea of a hub, and it means a geographic location upon which spokes will extend from. And I think that's generally what they mean in a regional level, but the hub is not a single point of reference or geographical place within one of these three states. It's an aggregation of end-use demonstrations that are diverse and designed to catalyze industrial activity and commercial activity with both demand and production.
And I'll add to that too. I think the opportunity here is not just in the development of the technology, but also in the development of the workforce and development of the career education, the training, and the diversity of our. I look forward to, I'm a little more diverse than these guys. I maybe increase the diversity of our team by being a woman engineer stepping into this space. So we want to accelerate, that kind of educational resources. We know to be able to be successful at any infrastructure project, be it just hydrogen or all the other infrastructure investments that are going to be made in the country over the years, it's going to take everyone we have in the workforce, and we're going to have to train a whole lot more coming forward in terms of these STEM jobs and things like that. It's an exciting time for our students, that are considering careers, but it's also an exciting time, like you said, for our universities to be part of these demonstrations. And again, I don't consider this, I don't think this is rocket science. I mean, we mentioned rockets earlier, but I think what we want it to be is, get our hands dirty, if you will, and get this on the, out in the real world as a viable solution. So anyway, I know, Jason, you might want to say something about the university effort a little bit more. I just touched on a little bit from Arkansas's perspective.
No doubt. And Secretary Keough, I echo exactly what you just articulated. I think that when you talk about opportunity, we want students to have opportunity in energy when they graduate. And I think that when we start to look at these pivots and these investments that are being made, we're changing how energy is produced. And I think that we want to make sure that our universities are at the forefront of keeping up with the trends, which this partnership clearly demonstrates that they are. And they have been working very closely with us. When we looked at a hub and we started to think internally, just when we started meeting just among our teams, we saw this as kind of having a three-tiered approach to a hub, and one being the political side and policy side and regulatory side. The second being our universities advising and really starting to inform us on technical decisions. And the third being our industrial partners and bringing those to the table, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones who have to build and transport materials across state lines. So I think that the university partnership for this is very something that is going to drive a lot of the things that we do moving forward. And we wanted to make sure that we have some of the best thinkers in industry who are looking at the latest research and development and demonstration opportunities for hydrogen. Even though that the production is not new, obviously we can always get better. And I think that by bringing in universities like LSU and Southern and USL and a lot of our University of Louisiana at Lafayette and Tech and University of Arkansas and Oklahoma and OSU, these are institutions that have a demonstrated history of really moving the ball forward in terms of energy. And I think that for us, that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, is to really make some very informed decisions and have industry right there with us, guiding how those decisions are made and looking for opportunities and things that we can grow and expand. At the end of the day, industry has to be able to implement a lot of those recommendations, but I think that there is so much going on in terms of trying to look at opportunities for efficiencies. And one of the biggest things that we're looking at is how do we expand hydrogen production in terms of getting it from point A to point B, to where that in use and that really those materials that we need to really ramp up in production, that people actually start getting comfortable with them and understand how those things can be used on a day-to-day basis. So at the end of the day, the educational part of it, working with our communities to understand, how these changes may be occurring. And again, I think it's also important to highlight that there are challenges associated from getting from where we are now to where we need to go. And I think that the more that we can be upfront about informing and working with our communities to demonstrate what those are, we're trying to expand renewable power. I think that Oklahoma right now is almost at 50% renewable power, which makes them a great partner. Louisiana and Arkansas are looking for other opportunities. And I think that for us, when we expand production of hydrogen, this is going to help us start to look toward that future time frame, which is, for us, it's very exciting. And I think that, oftentimes we get very focused on very short-term things. This is something that I think will benefit everyone in the long term. And that's what makes this partnership so exciting when we look at the opportunities that we have in front of us.
Yeah, Scott, one just other thing I would add is, when it comes to the idea of producing hydrogen, I think in these early days, you simply need the availability of hydrogen. So whether it comes from renewable energy or a natural gas feedstock, we need all of it. And so, the more hydrogen that's available, the more likely we're going to be able to demonstrate it. So, we're not picky about, and I think our task force indicated that, and I think our partners in both Louisiana and Arkansas aren't necessarily picky about what the feedstock of the hydrogen is. We want affordable, clean hydrogen, that can help us demonstrate this, that it is a viable fuel source to be integrated within our energy systems within our state, whether it's, blending it 30% in a power plant, an existing natural gas power plant, or powering fuel cell vehicles, or powering a steel facility, or use in refineries.
I think, Ken, you're right. It's the marketplace that will drive the final answer on this. And I think that's the benefit of this hub, is that we're thinking on the end user side of it, because while maybe to some people it is important where the hydrogen comes from, that takes time, it takes investment, it takes technology demonstration. That's what this is all about. But get the end users bought in, those competitive changes will occur in the marketplace. And I think that that's the important thing that we could do. And I mean, we have a small company in Arkansas, that has become a leader in sustainability by just doing demonstration after demonstration and seeing what's affordable, but can still sell retail prices, at a very low cost. And so I think that's kind of the model. We want investment to go where there'll be a lasting effect in the marketplace. So again, we tend to be the center of commerce across these three. We move a lot of goods from east to west across the United States. Highways, we talked about in Arkansas, have long distance hauler. We have large trucking companies in Arkansas, as well as you do in Oklahoma, that are relying on finding answers, make sure that that those businesses continue to deliver goods and services in a way that the public demands. And I think that our workforce is, as a result of the pandemic, has become more diverse in where they want to live and where they want to work. And I think we are also states that are very attractive to our millennial workforce and our others that want to come in and have a balance, not only a beautiful state to live in and with a lot of interesting things to do, but also be able to bring their knowledge to quick, to solutions. And I think we just stand to be in a really good place at the right time for this.
What has basically been the reaction to hydrogen? I mean, we started off the program by saying you just don't see a lot of coverage of this. I mean, you also really have to go to the financial papers and the financial networks to read this. This is not in public policy concerns and debates and coverage very much at all. It's like George Jetson, I referred to it earlier. But as you're starting to work with universities and you're starting to work with public policy people that know this is going on, the three governors who are high profile individuals, what has been the reaction to this announcement and to this energy source?
Jason, you want to start that?
Go right ahead.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Secretary Wagner. I think that Scott, the reaction is one of, I think we're all waiting on good things to come. And I think that when we look at the collaboration that's happened, we're all very excited about where we are. And I think that you can tell that there's a level of enthusiasm, not only among us, but we're very enthusiastic because of the people that we've been meeting with. We've had the opportunity personally. I know that I've ridden on hydrogen buses. I've seen fuel cells in action. I've been to plants that are producing hydrogen and doing it in an environmentally responsible manner. These are things that are going to change the energy outlook in the future. And I think that for us, we see it as a tremendous opportunity in all of our states. And I think that when we look at what DOE has done to kind of set the stage, to really put a stake in the ground and say that this is an area and a region where we want to grow clean energy investments. I think that that's what's so exciting for us, is that our departments have an immense opportunity to do some great things for our states and to be able to really bring energy education and to get kids excited about going into engineering, into sciences, and really taking pride in knowing that they've had a part in that. And we put policies and things in place for them to be successful. So I think that at the end of the day, that's why I get excited about coming to work every day. That wouldn't be anywhere where I'd prefer to be. Just you've seen the level of coverage and the commercials that are happening with clean energy, that this is the time to really get excited and to try to get these things out of the door.
Scott, I would take issue a little bit with the idea that nobody's talking about it. Maybe it's not mainstream media, but we attended, all three of us actually attended Sarah Week. It was us and 7,000 of our closest friends. And literally, this is the world's biggest energy conference. And, the president of OPEC to John Kerry to Secretary Granholm to the CEOs of all the majors, ExxonMobil, BP, Occidental, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Phillips 66, they were all there. Williams companies in Oklahoma, 500 speakers. And I will tell you that 60% of the program mentioned or dealt with hydrogen in some way on a 6-day junket. And so I will tell you that it is mainstream in the industry. This tremendous push from an environmental social governance or ESG perspective to decarbonize. And, the federal government uses the term sectors that are hard to decarbonize. Two of those are, most prevalent in our three states, right? Transportation and the industrial corridor. I think we have a good idea of how the power sector will decarbonize with renewable energy and continuing to have natural gas and those things to balance through the intermittency of renewable energy. But these other sectors are much more difficult to talk about, and hydrogen seems to be that consensus answer to the most likely or most probable way that those sectors will ultimately decarbonize. And so I would just say that it is a lot more mainstream than what you think. It's just, the markets would be already in use if the affordability were there. And so that's what this demonstration hub and these implementation dollars at DOE are all about, is finding ways to lower those costs to make them more commercially viable.
I think it's fascinating to me. And what I'm hearing is that the media's got to catch up on this. And that's what we're trying to do today. Is there's some things that the market understands, but not everybody covering it. Well, I want to give everybody a chance to just take a moment for final thoughts. We're just scratching the surface today. By the way, maybe just throw this out because I'll be asked: has there been any decision yet as to where the facility would be and the hydrogen that you make? Is it going to be trucked or pipeline? Any of those answers at this point?
I think it's all of the above, right? I mean, hydrogen is going to be produced in Louisiana. It's going to be produced in Oklahoma. It's going to be moved across Arkansas. It's going to be moved within Arkansas. It's going to be used at places within Arkansas and Oklahoma and Louisiana. And so each of those factors, whether it's using trucks, whether it's using tugboats, whether it's using forklifts, those are all things that need to be demonstrated that they can be done in a commercially viable way. And they all contribute to a relevant and viable hydrogen economy. So we need all of that. So it's not one place. It's not one thing. That's the strength of our hub, is that we can do all of it within these three borders.
Yeah, and I would add to that, don't count Arkansas out on the production side. We may see opportunities with the abundant water resources we have. Some of our renewable investment, we have a nuclear facility might be a good source, but also on the back end, we're very excited about the fact that we've a lot of the critical elements in South Arkansas looking at lithium commercially viable as a potential, maybe one of the first U.S. sources to be available for, to push into battery, production to support the industry, but also just the concept of storage of energy, and that's going to be important. So I think we're all excited about a lot of opportunity with Ken, that it's not one location. It could be one location for the purposes of the demonstration, showing where we can get it to market. I think, again, we want to sit down with these alliances and partners to figure out what works best for them. I mean, again, I think that has to lead the discussion. As if we can find partners that want these have end uses, then we will be able to better define the scope of the project going forward, for the purposes of winning this competition. And in my mind, we're going to win anyway, because just the conversation, the partnership that we're having right now is generating a lot of excitement, but also potentially a lot of investment across, that we can inform investors and corporate citizens, what we have to offer them. So I think the conversation you mentioned at the grassroots level with citizens, that's going to be a critical part of it too. And I hope we can begin to educate people on what hydrogen is, but also get them beyond the fear factor of hydrogen bombs, make it more about a fuel choice. Just like when you go make a choice right now at the gas pump, we want it to be one of the fuel choices. People probably won't even think about what the fuel is. They'll just know it's a car, or it powers their truck, or it powers their house. So that's the kind of conversation we want it to be, that everybody feels very comfortable with it being a viable solution. So.
Director, last thoughts?
Sure. I'll echo a lot of my colleagues, just similar thoughts. I think that we cannot be more excited about where we are. And I think that when you look at the opportunity for our region and for our country to grow these types of technologies, we're all going to win when these types of things move forward. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what's so exciting for us, is that we've got a tremendous opportunity to work with friends and work with industry, to bring people to the table and work with our communities so that we can look at long-term decarbonization. And I think that, our department's extremely excited about it, and that we're very, very optimistic about this collaboration moving forward, because again, our approaches have been so similar. And I think that our, at the end of the day, we cannot be even more excited about just the opportunity to look at how we're going to move in a very calculated manner to really look at bringing everyone to the table. And I think that that's what this has done. The excitement level is high. I think it's going to remain that way. And we look forward to continuing our work together.
Well, we're delighted to have you three. I hope that this is not one and done. I hope it sounds to me like we've got a lot of impending news about universities, the workforce. We were just talking on my weekend segments about workforce in Oklahoma, the nurse shortage in Oklahoma, some really innovative things there. Secretary Wagner, Secretary Keough, Director Lanclos, it's really nice to meet you. And we'll look forward to seeing you folks again. Best of luck. Why do I feel like saying beat Texas? I'm not really sure why that just popped up. Ain't nothing
No
wrong
comment.
with that, right? And thanks to all of our viewers on this special exclusive Mitchell Talks on News 9, News on 6, to our friends in Baton Rouge. Are you in Little Rock?
I am.
Becky? Okay.
Yes.
You go down the street to Doe's and get a big steak.
There you go.
We were there.
Please join us anytime.
Will do. And Secretary Wagner, thanks for putting this together.
Great to be here.
All right. And thanks to our audience. We'll see you this evening, 7 o'clock on our regularly scheduled Newswatch Oklahoma. And for everyone here, have a great afternoon.
Thanks.